Welcome to the Fire Time Podcast, where it's never hot enough, slow is fast, and the way to win is to make it so stupidly easy to buy from you that there's no excuse not to. I'm your host, Tim Reed. And as always, I'm so excited to be here today. Thank you for listening to the Fire Time Podcast. Well, it's no surprise to anybody listening to this that we are still in the middle of the COVID crisis. And at least where I am in the Pacific Northwest, most places are still under shelter-in-place guidelines. And there's some businesses that are beginning to open up. There's many that have deemed themselves essential, and they're trying to plod through. But what we all know is that business looks different than it did 3 months ago. And I'm excited about this episode today because I felt like the timing was very relevant to talk about how companies respond to crisis. And what I've realized throughout this COVID-19 pandemic is that there's companies all over the board in regards to the way they've chosen to respond. And there's some businesses that have just pretty much gone into shelter-in-place mode. They duck their head, they lay off staff, they cut costs, and they wait. And there's other businesses that don't panic, that think clearly and proactively, and they start asking the questions, where is the opportunity and what can we do to reach our customers and be there for our team members now more than ever when they need us? And I'm excited about this conversation today because I'm speaking with a leader who was able to make a very quick pivot in regards to the way that they found opportunity in the midst of COVID-19. And I think that there's some really good insight on the thought process that we all need to have. Now, one thing I'm going to share with you before we get into this conversation is how one of my friends, Grant Falco, responded to this crisis. When COVID-19 hit, just like was true for every business, he was majorly disrupted, right? We came back from the HPBExpo in New Orleans to a different world. And after going through the same fear that everybody has to deal with, he decided to do something about it. And he went on the offensive, making a plan of how he was going to attack this, hold on to his team members, and come through stronger on the other side. What this has culminated in is a message to his community. And so basically what Grant did is he called me up and we put together a message for his community, Spokane. And we put together a hashtag called Spokane Rises. And the idea was that we wanted to create a message that the entire community could get around and use as a rallying cry to help support the small businesses that have always been there for them. And so what we did is we put together a script and we asked ourselves, if we were in the community, if we were at home scared and uncertain, what would be the message that we need to hear to inspire us to be there for our community? And after that, we planned out the shots that needed to be taken, and Grant went and found a videographer, and this video is unreal. For anybody that's trying to figure out what is my messaging during the crisis, you need to take a look at this because it's genuine and authentic, but it is calling the community to action. So if you want to, you can open up the show notes of this episode and you're going to see a link to the YouTube video. If you like it or want to share it, make sure to use that hashtag Spokane Rises. You know, I think right now businesses haven't been sure, am I supposed to sell? Am I supposed to just be there for my customers? And we tried to put this video together to address exactly what needs to be done. So with that said, we're going to jump into the conversation. As always, we'll circle back at the end. I'll have some parting thoughts on the mentality that we need to have as we continue to forge out the new normal in the wake of this crisis. Joining me from Baltimore, Maryland is the Director of Sales at Ray Murray. I'm joined by Casey Harvey. How you doing, Casey?
Good. Thanks for having me, Tim.
Hey, my pleasure, man. I'm excited that you're here. And I think that this conversation, obviously the timing is more important than ever that we start discussing what do we do in response to this crisis. But before we get to that, I'd love to have you share just a little bit about what you do and how it was that you got there.
Sure. Yeah. So my history in the fireplace business is probably like everybody else's that didn't grow up in it. You know, nobody gets out of school saying, I'm going to be in the fireplace business. So my route, it's interesting when I talk with customers and dealers, that's one of the first things I ask is, how'd you get in this crazy business? Because the stories are always really interesting.
Yeah.
Generally, if you're not, second or third generation, the path is typically crazy. So I got out of school with a degree in philosophy, and my aim was to be a professor. So I got into a bunch of grad programs and really was kind of burned out, after college and before grad school. And needed a job. Ended up getting a job at a propane and heating oil company in Baltimore, just as a customer service rep in the summer. Ended up staying on, spent 2 years as a frontline customer service rep at a heating oil company. And it's intense, especially in the wintertime. Phones are always ringing. It was intense, and just really worked my way up there. Started a propane division there and was involved in starting that. So quickly rose through the ranks, doing sales, doing marketing, and becoming a sales manager, marketing manager, things like that. And in my late 20s, I was kind of hit a ceiling. Unless I married into the family, that was kind of where I was going to be. There was no other place to go. So I started looking around, and Ray Murray was one of our suppliers, one of our vendors, and I reached out, just kind of on a whim to somebody I knew, and sent my resume in and went up to meet those guys. They're headquartered in the Berkshire Mountains in Western Mass, a beautiful place, and really just fell in love with the business when I got there. It was an interesting time for Ray Murray. They were kind of in the same boat I was in. It was second generation, really no succession plan, kind of a mom and pop shoestring together kind of distribution business. And at that point, a couple of years before I started, they brought on our president and owner now, Mike Hopsicker, and he was running a very large fuel co-op in the Northeast Agway. They sold their business to Suburban Propane and came into Ray Murray as kind of the next generation. Yeah. So they were transitioning at that time too to become more professional and expand their business. So it was a good time to be in that business.
That's awesome, man. Well, yeah, it's funny. No one sets out to get into the business, but once you're here, we talk about this a lot on the podcast. Like, it's an awesome business to be in.
Yeah, I love it. It's so good. It kind of hits everything. It's got some technical stuff. It's got a lot of creative, a lot of merchandising, a lot of retail. It's just a lot of that kind of stuff that I dig. So yeah, I love it.
Well, Casey, the reason I wanted to have you on was to talk specifically about the COVID-19 crisis and your response to it. But what I want to do is back up and ask you, where were you specifically when this thing hit and what was going through your mind?
Yeah, probably like a lot of folks, it was at the HPBA show, right? So prior to the show, you'd see the news and say, man, this is kind of crazy, but it really didn't hit home till he got at the show or maybe the week leading up to it, when things got serious and shows were getting canceled and, lockdowns started happening. So it was kind of at that show that, you were there. It was a weird vibe. It was pretty intense. There was a lot of gallows humor going on there, and it was kind of a mixed bag of responses there. Most people that I talked to, and I don't know if it was bravado or not at the show, were basically like, it's going to be a 2-week shutdown.
Yep,
it'll be over. It's going to be a huge bounce back. It's no big deal. And I was pretty convinced that this is going to be a long-term deal. I mean, at that time, you saw China was just kind of getting out of it after 3 or 4 months. Italy was going nuts, and I was like, this is pretty serious. I think we're in for at least a couple months of this, and then what are we going to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to reach our customers? What does that look like? And the moment I got off the plane back home that Friday night, they closed schools for 2 months, and it was that's when you knew it was things weren't going to be the way they were.
Yeah. I mean, I think about it. I was at that show too, and the vibe down there, it felt very insulated, because I swear we were like the last trade show that didn't get canceled. So you're there and you're kind of in a bubble thinking like, well, it's not that different. Like, you got kind of COVID in the back of your mind, but it was kind of like situation normal. You just go about the trade show. And I remember me and my wife stayed a couple extra days to hang out in New Orleans. We were worried about even getting home. We're like, are we going to have to rent a car and drive home to Oregon from New Orleans? Like, what about our kids? We made it home. And I mean, coming back that day, it was a different world that we arrived at than when we left.
Yeah. So that was kind of ground zero for us. And I think for the industry in general, for sure.
So you had to pivot real quickly. And right away, what Ray Murray did is you guys launched a series of free webinars that have had a lot of success. I want to ask you, how did you pivot so fast? And why have those webinars had success when other companies that have tried to do the same thing haven't had it take off?
Yeah, I think we got out quick to do it, and the concept was kind of lightning quick. It was essentially my concept was, let's do trainings. Ray Murray, part of our DNA is technical support and training. That's what we do. That's what we're known for. That's what we're famous for in the industry. We've always done that. That's been an essential part of what we do. With our sales force kind of grounded, it was like, we gotta do something to stay in front of our customers. And for me coming back, it was almost therapeutic to just unplug and talk about BTUs and talk about vent runs and kind of shut off the news. And that's what I wanted to do. So really that was the concept of, let's set these things up for half an hour every morning. Guys, unplug from the chaos of what's going on, plug in, get some information, and hopefully that's helpful for their business. And then also really just kind of have a little normal piece of time where the world wasn't falling apart. So that was the concept. Same time every day, same process to get into the meetings every day. So it was I really wanted to have it a routine. So you knew at 10 o'clock every day for half an hour only, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to plug in, and then I've got the rest of my day to do what I'm doing. So that was kind of the concept, and we pulled it off pretty quick. And I think that was the success, was having it be short, be sweet, to the point, and having the process be kind of a routine deal.
So what I want to ask then is, how did you guys make a cohesive plan to do this in the midst of that chaos? Because I'm assuming you guys hadn't run webinars on this scale before. Every day of the week, we're rocking the same time, a webinar. How did you make a plan that quickly while there's chaos just everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, what I did was I took the calendar, and I said, I want to start on, I don't remember what the first day was. I think April 6th. So it was pretty quick after that show. And every day, and I basically penciled in our different vendors and topics, scheduled it out ahead of time, and went to our vendors and said, this is what we're doing. I need your participation in this, right? So it was something that, they didn't have to come up with platforms. They didn't have to figure out how to do it. It was done. And we've used GoToMeeting before. That's a platform we used here, and I was pretty familiar with it. But that's essentially it. We said, this is what we're doing. We expect you as our vendor partners to kind of step up and lead these classes. This is when you're going to be on. This is how to do it. Super easy. And that's what we did.
Well, I love the decisiveness. I've seen some companies that have acted intentionally like you guys did, but there's been plenty of other companies that haven't acted intentionally. They got hit with this and just panic and fear ensues. And they're thinking about, how can we slash our prices? What team members do we need to lay off? That's their first thought, as opposed to, okay, how can I reach my customers during this time? What do we need to do to stay relevant? Those are two different series of questions. And I think the companies that acted like you did are the ones that are going to win.
Yeah, listen, we're going to, I'm not retiring anytime soon. So we're here for the long haul. And, that's where business is built on. What are we going to do now? And if we're going to do something now, it's not going to be a little short-term flash in the pan. It's got to be, make sense and be sustainable. So, cutting, folks or resources is just, cutting off your nose to spite your face there. It's not a good position to be in. We've been through this before, in the downturn, the housing market, 2008, 2009, 2010. We didn't lay off any sales folks. That's a time where you have to hang on to your best folks. Yeah. Those are the folks that are going to find something elsewhere, right? So you got to hang on to these guys, figure out a way to get through it. And this is kind of adapt or die times. And this was one of those things that we could do just to keep the connection with our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I like that. And I feel like you guys with your webinars, there's been a level of professionalism and success that I haven't seen with every company. There's been a lot of companies that have kind of been just jumping on, everybody's doing webinars, so we need to start doing them as well. And there's been varied success. How have you been able to keep the quality so consistent?
Well, I think having them super short, and super focused makes it really easy to hit the point. The feedback we've gotten, to your point, has been basically, your webinars, not to toot our own horn, but your coffee talks have been far and away, better than any of our vendors, better than anything else. It's something we look forward to. So keeping them short and sweet and having a focus for each one. Not that we're going to take, majestic fireplaces and condense that session down to 30 minutes, right? That doesn't work. Yeah. Okay. So let's focus on, specific products, new products, categories, things like that you can really, go a little bit deeper in and focused on.
I think it's a great approach. You knew what you were going after and you hit it with focus. So whether you're listening to this and you want to provide long form content where you're providing something that's an hour and a half, 2 hours, or whether you're doing short, punchy snippets, I think knowing what you're going after is super important. And there's a lot of companies that just, we're going to do webinars. What's that look like? Who knows? Let's just do them and see what happens. That doesn't really work.
Yeah, exactly. So, this was an opportunity for us and our vendor partners also. I love putting together presentations and training sessions and things like that. And you probably do too, because it enables me to refine, my thinking process. Oh, yeah. I always learn more when I do these things.
Yes.
For me, kind of my creative process is I start out with a lot, right? I start writing a lot and then end up kind of chiseling down to get to the nut of what we're doing. And part of the focus of having these little constraints, this 30-minute constraint, is it forces you to really focus in on what's important and what's not important, right?
Oh yeah.
And you could kind of take that and writ large it, but having those constraints, really gives you freedom in some ways to focus in, right?
Oh man, dude, we could do a whole podcast about how constraint actually gives you freedom. That's like one of the fundamental beliefs of my life, is that freedom is found in constraint, not in uninhibited freedom. It's just not.
Yeah, I mean, this as a musician, not to get too off track, but we always record in a studio because if I sat at my house with home recording software, which you can do these days, and it sounds magnificent, I would never be able to finish a song. But being in a studio for 5 days, this is what we got to do. This is the way we got to do it. And these are the tracks we have to lay out. And, you get more freedom and you get to play around more once you know those constraints. So,
yes. Yeah. Oh man, I love that. Okay. So I want to ask you this. So obviously you're putting this content out and you're staying in touch with a lot of people. What are you seeing that the market looks like right now? And how do you think this is going to affect the future of where business is in our industry?
We cover a pretty big market. So we basically cover everything east of the Mississippi. So it's really regionalized the impact now, right? So the Northeast, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, that area is just, has been shut down and kind of decimated. The South has been pretty open, so that stuff has been really regional. I think what we have seen, obviously, is kind of the acceleration of the shift to online, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm convinced that, that's going to be a bigger and bigger part of our business going forward. And the retailers that can figure that out are going to be the ones that win in the long term, right? Yeah. So I think it's so I do think, on the online thing that once we get out of the, in the next 6 months or so, or 12 months, or however long it takes us to kind of get back to, get the health issues out of the way with the coronavirus, folks will come back to retail. Okay. I think, there's going to be I just miss going shopping kind of a thing, right? So I don't think it's going to, retail hasn't completely gone away, but they're going to go back to retailers that provide a fun experience, right? Yep. Anything that you can do online, for stuff that you don't enjoy doing, you're going to do now, right? It's just gotten easier and easier to do that. So in our industry, I think part of it is making, creating these good experiences in experiential shopping, shopping environment, and making it, fun that, I want to go to a retail shop, and I can prep ahead of time by using, online information and things like that. But the merging of those two worlds, that's where retailers are going to win, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm convinced that the digital plus physical buying experience is the silver bullet for retailers, because you think about online only vendors, and this is something that I've been talking about with Grant Falco in some of our webinars, is that our industry has bought into a myth of e-commerce, where we believe that e-commerce is only one model, and it means I sell nationwide into other people's territory and I don't support my product. And that's not the only model of e-commerce. And I think what's happening with the COVID crisis is that we're starting to open our eyes and say, you know what? There actually is an e-commerce model that I can utilize in my local market. And if you think about this, if you're a local retailer, having a digital plus physical experience is your unshoppable value wedge against an online only vendor. Because having a physical space like you have is what an online only vendor would dream of. They would dream of it. But their problem is, when you're an online only vendor selling nationwide, you cannot physically be everywhere. And sure, over time, they might try to make installation relationships, but there's a lot of relationships and a lot of scale that has to go right for that to win. Where for you, you're already localized. So that digital plus physical buying experience, it's a value wedge to separate you from the noise that's trying to disrupt you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, shop local. That will, folks are going to want to look to support their local businesses. So I think there's, there is some silver linings there. But you make an eloquent point there about having that full experience of online, and showroom, whether it's a physical showroom that you go to, or a mobile showroom, that you take on the road, right? So, and again, that's stuff that's not repeatable, for online only guys. So, with you there.
So, Casey, I want to ask you, what are customers looking for right now from their suppliers during a time of crisis like this?
I think one, they're looking for flexibility. Okay, in terms of helping. I guess I don't want to get into kind of, to too many details, because there's a lot going on there, but, really flexibility, kind of meet me where I am and help me get through this crisis, I guess is kind of what I'm trying to say. So whether it's, inventory or dating terms or working with me on credit, things like that, that's what gets you through a crisis, is those relationships. And I believe, the more you work with your customers, that, those good deeds, come back and build that kind of equity and partnership to go forward. So, having flexibility to kind of meet your customers where they are, to understand their challenges, to have what they need when they need it. So what we've seen on the distribution side of the business is a lot of our manufacturers have gone down or shut down, for various lengths of time production. So one of the benefits distributors have is deeper inventory than a lot of our just-in-time lean manufacturing folks. Okay, and also distributors that have generally larger inventory capacities. It's the folks that were kind of operating on the margins really got squeezed out. Over the last 2 months.
Yeah. So for you as a leader, you had to make some quick decisions and pivot and be very sure of those decisions going forward in the midst of chaos. Why is it so important right now as a leader to be so grounded in a time of uncertainty?
Well, it's easy to get caught up in kind of the emotion of where we're at and what's going on. But, for us, I think, the decisions we made weren't really new decisions or new strategies or 180s. It was maybe, kind of things we were always doing, just done a little bit differently. Values we've always had. We've always valued training. Okay. So let's figure out a way to deliver that, in a format that makes sense. We've always valued, our inventory capacity. Well, let's figure out what that means, in terms of being a better partner. We've always valued having, what we consider some of the best business intelligence around. So looking at a market and helping our customers identify, what's going on in each market, whether we're looking at housing starts or whether we're looking at, how many homes in a county, have wood heat. So, that kind of stuff, and we can kind of package that a little bit differently and go to market a little bit differently. But those kind of insights are not new, right? I mean, those are our values. It's just kind of adapting those for where we're at.
As a distributor, I think one of the biggest pieces of value you can give your customers is business intelligence like that, because you've got perspective on market trends that individual retailers don't. And I think it's amazing that you're leveraging that. Obviously, it sounds like you'd been thinking about that for a while, but because you were grounded in that, you were able to figure out new ways to apply it. You weren't reinventing the wheel, thinking, wait, how do we deliver business value to our dealers now that we have to do a webinar? It was already there. You just had to lock and load it.
Yeah, and I think it's it's being authentic to who you are, and whether we're dealing with our dealers as customers or as retailers with their own customers. I think authenticity to kind of who you are, really goes a long way, right? So, if training wasn't important to us, or if sharing business intelligence wasn't important to us before, and now all of a sudden, hey, we got all this great stuff to share. Now the business is down. Let's work with you to figure out how to make it. So that stuff, folks kind of end up seeing right through that. So, having an authentic and consistent, value proposition is really important.
Oh, that's really good. Okay, I got one last question for you. I'm going to put you on the spot. This crisis has made everybody just think about things differently. And I want to know, what is one thing that no one in the industry is talking about right now that they should be?
So I'll give you two things, and I think they're kind of related. And it's not that nobody's talking about it, but I think not enough people are talking about it. So number one, the trend we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years of despecifying fireplaces. Okay. HPBA has kind of talked around it a little bit, but not a lot being done at the national level. And quite frankly, business was good for most dealers. Okay. And I think what we've seen as price points have gone up, on units, it's kind of masked the actual quantity of units, right? Okay. So I think we're losing ground there. Okay. And, that certainly needs to be top of mind is, yes, how do we grow, top line revenue, while at the same time, growing, continuing our quantity sales, right? So, my personal fireplace story is, I grew up in, the half of homes in this country that didn't have a fireplace. Okay. So I grew up, I didn't have a fireplace. My wife, by, freak of demographics, grew up with no fireplace. Okay. So when we went to buy our first home, fireplaces were nowhere on the list of things we ought to look for in a new home. No idea, didn't know what I was missing, didn't care. Okay. So, I guess the takeaway there is, I grew up in one of those despecified homes, right? And the more that number creeps down, the less future generations we are down the line. There's, kind of what sports teams try to do, or with these youth nights, is develop the next generation of fans. Oh yeah. Okay, right. So they, a lot of outreach to kids, so that when they grow up, they take their kids to a ball game, and it's part of their life. Same with fireplaces. I didn't grow up with a fireplace. Now I have one now, because I'm in the industry, but it just wasn't important to me. Wasn't on the radar, and if we bought a house and I wasn't in this industry, didn't have a fireplace, it wouldn't be on my kids' radar either. Yeah. Right. So that's kind of the multiplying effect of the despecification is, not only are we losing fireplaces now, but down the line, it becomes less and less important to future consumers. Right.
Man, that's insightful. I love it. And I think you're right that until very recently, there were not many people talking about this, and we got to throw everything into it, because for the last 8 years, we could be lazy. Yeah, sure, we're losing market share on the incidence rate nationally, but you know what? We're still making tons of money because our prices are getting higher, and you're right, that has masked the effect of what's going on. But now that we've had the rug pulled out on our top-line sales, all of a sudden we're looking around saying, man, not that much stuff is getting spec'd, and if it wasn't getting spec'd before, what's going to happen now on the backside of this thing? Like, we're going to have to do some hard work to start winning those specs back.
Yeah, so and then the other issue that kind of goes hand in hand with that to some extent is climate change. Okay. Oh, yeah. And, and that, so, and that has to do with, feeds into the despecification process. Right. So, the owner of Ray Murray, Mike Hopsicker would always say, we're in the fireplace business. Fire has been fundamental to the human race since caveman days, right? That's one of his quotes.
Yep.
And whether it was burning wood or pellets or gas or electric or whatever the next fuel can be, I guess is irrelevant. So this, we've got to kind of embrace the product, not the fuel, and the lifestyle and not the product. And I guess one of my pet peeves in the industry is really kind of, and we see this, driven from manufacturers, is reducing, this fireplace experience to an appliance, right? We see manufacturers talk about appliance sales and appliance units, and listen, a washing machine is an appliance. Okay, a clothes dryer is an appliance. My furnace is an appliance. Toaster oven appliance. I don't get excited about shopping about those things. So when we continue to kind of push fireplaces as appliances, again, that pushes stuff online because it's not fun to shop.
It
if I can buy a
commoditizes it.
toaster online instead of going to Target, I will do that all day long. And if a fireplace is an appliance, why wouldn't I just buy that online?
Oh man, that's so good. Yeah, marketing people that are listening to this, take note of that. We sell an emotionally driven product, and there absolutely is technical value. There's a lot of things to it that are important to talk about, but at the end of the day, the reason consumers buy it is because how it makes them feel.
Right.
Well, Casey, this has been awesome. I appreciate you coming on to the show, man. I think that you guys are doing just some really cool things, and I think that people are going to get a ton of insight just hearing about your thought process and how you chose to respond to this crisis.
Good. Thanks for having me, Tim. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation with Casey. He was somebody that I thought about as I saw him putting together these webinars, and I think what he did really well was the fact that he responded so quickly, and I think that Ray Murray really set the bar for what a regular series of webinars in our industry needs to look like. Now, as we back up and think about it from the beginning, when you listen to Casey, he didn't panic, right? So when he got home from Expo, I'm sure that there was fear in the back of his mind about this is uncertain, what are things going to look like in the future? But he didn't act out of panic. And that is so important. The question that he was asking is, we're in this situation now, times are uncertain, so what can we do to reach our customers? What is going to give them value while they're in a position to not be able to sell as much? And the answer was training. And that's the absolute truth. I love how their webinar series was short and sweet. Now, there's nothing against webinars that are longer, but I think for him, what they chose to do is right because they don't have the same types of speakers coming on every week. And if push comes to shove, it's better to give somebody a little bit less and leave them wanting more than give them too much and feel like, well, I don't need to go back for anything else. So that was really, really intelligent. They also had the webinars available at the same time every single week. And if you look at the results of it, it was really effective. Ray Murray is now seen as one of the guides that is there for their customers during this time. And that's really important. Now, circling out a little bit bigger picture, I was putting together some thoughts about what I've learned during this crisis. And it kind of comes down to a few different things. Number one, what I've learned in this crisis is that preparation matters. There's a lot of businesses that are reeling because they weren't adequately prepared. And hopefully these businesses make it through, but there are going to be some that end up closing their doors because they weren't ready for this. Now, obviously, no one could have seen this coming, at least to the scale that it's at, but we still all need to be ready for a rainy day. I think about, for me, I left my job right when this crisis started, and that was a planned move between me and Fireside. We'd walked down that path for a number of months, and I left on great terms, but the only way I was able to see that through was the preparation that our family had made for the better part of a year leading up to this. And I was telling my wife the other day that I'm thankful that we'd prepared. I'm thankful that, yeah, this has been a disruption, but we've not been shaken to our core because of the way that we've set aside our finances, we've lived below our means, and we've put ourselves in a position to be able to weather a storm. And the same thing is true for our businesses. The businesses that have been prepared for a rainy day, that aren't scrambling month to month to make payroll, are the ones who are going to be stronger on the other side of this. Another thing that I've learned is that in a crisis, communication matters. I've seen companies that have not had good communication with their team members. And it's not even necessarily that they made the wrong decisions, it's that those decisions were not communicated clearly. And in a time of crisis, when fear and panic are in place, it's more important than ever that the leaders of a company communicate with extreme clarity. They communicate over and over and over again. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. This is what that means for our company. This is why it was a difficult decision, and here's what it will mean for us in the future. As a leader, the way that you communicate in many ways is actually more important than the decision that you make. And the reason why is that any leader in a company has people underneath them. And if you want people to go with you, they have to have an understanding of where they're going. The leader has got to go slow and always be pointing the team to the mark on the horizon. During this crisis, that has been more true than ever. So if you're a leader in a company and you're wondering why it's been difficult to manage your people through this time, I would ask, have you been communicating with them clearly? Have you been explaining, this is where we're going, these are the decisions that we're going to make, even if they're hard decisions, this is what we have to do to get over here. Communication matters. The next thing is that now's the time to build. Over the last 8 years, business has been easy, and there's been a lot of companies that have been able to be lazy because it's just been a matter of surfing the tidal wave. Well, the tidal wave's gone, and it doesn't mean that there's no opportunity. We'll get there in just 1 second. But what we got to realize is that right now, it's the time to build. We have the opportunity now to look at our businesses like never before. And as I've been speaking with dealers and manufacturers and distributors across the country, there are a lot of people that are actually excited for what they've learned about their business, and they can't wait to take advantage of it on the backside of this crisis. So for anybody listening, this is the time to build. Yes, there's fear. Yes, we don't exactly know what cash flow is going to look like. But the truth is that the choices we have are, we can work on building for something better, or we can hunker down and die the death of 1,000 cuts as we are not relevant in the post-COVID world. As I've been teaching these webinars, what I'm seeing is a hunger in our industry for businesses that are throwing away the status quo. They're realizing that they can't just rely on the brand equity that they thought they had. Instead, they have to dig deep and find the best practices and the best people so that they can serve their customers even more in the coming years. The very last thing, and I'll end the podcast here. Opportunity is now here. If you ever heard Tim Rethlake speak, and I think this is a Zig Ziglar thing as well, there's a phrase that gets written on a board. And if you're in the audience, you have the choice of how to pronounce it. And you can pronounce it one of two ways. Either opportunity is nowhere, or opportunity is now here. I firmly believe the second one is the case. Obviously, our economy has been dramatically impacted, and there's people that are afraid to get out of their houses and afraid to spend money. But the truth is that folks are still spending money. And we have the opportunity now to connect to our customers in ways that we never imagined. Now more than ever, people are wanting to connect and interact with other people. That bodes well for our businesses. Now more than ever, people have had a chance to live in their homes with their ugly fireplaces and fire pits outside. That bodes really, really well for us. Opportunity is now here for the companies who see it. For those who want to play to win and not to lose, we can change the way that our industry is connected with customers, and that starts today. So with that in mind, I hope that you guys have an amazing rest of your week. I hope that you're not making decisions out of fear, but rather you're stepping up to be the intentional leader that your team needs you to be.
Thank you for listening to the Fire Time Podcast. To learn more,
visit the website itsfiretime.com. Music from this episode was written and recorded by In Bloom out of Portland, Oregon. We thank you for listening to the Fire Time Podcast, where it's never hot enough, slow is fast, and the way to win is to make it so stupidly easy to buy from you that there's no excuse not to. We'll see you next time.
All in to burn.